First obstacle, personal concern. The struggle for control between the ego and the higher self is like tightrope walking, and indeed is a perpetual paradox. For one must learn to close one's own circuit and yet not limit oneself. One must be able to shut oneself in the quote, egg of cloud and yet lose oneself in the illimitable. One must in fact commit the supreme egoism of seeking one's own perfect realization, and do so with the supremely altruistic aim of learning to give oneself entirely. The Tao says, he alone can save others who has achieved his own salvation, but in saving himself, he saves the world. Zhuangzi says, only that which is fixed can fix that which is fixed. But since the aim is the triumph of the impersonal, the chief obstacle is anxiety for one's personal self. The personality defends its existence and prerogatives with ferocity. It is a gorgon, a dragon, and like Fafnir, it resists and possesses. It bears down with all its earthly weight on the vital flame which was entrusted to it at birth, and suffocates it, for fear that the fire, if it should flare up, would take control. Its kingdom is that of contingency, whose many responsibilities every human being is obliged to accept. It would be a mistake to try to apply to these practical values the same attitude as is needed towards the values of reality. On the contrary, they should be considered coldly as rational problems, which can be solved in a mechanical way, without the heart's becoming involved. In this field, we must not become identified with the object of our preoccupation, for then the gorgon would confuse all our values, cloud our judgment, and extract from us decisions in conformity with its merely personal interests. Whether the problems concern material things or the conventions of social life, we must consider them apart from ourselves, and let the brain answer them by reducing them to their lowest terms. We ourselves remaining secure in the armor of indifference. This is an opportunity to practice concentration of thought, the discernment which can discriminate between the requirements of a situation and the caprices of a personality. Obviously, the thought of our ultimate aim should always be our criterion of judgment, but our emotional centers, the bile and spleen, must not be allowed to influence the decisions of our reason. Also, the three lower activities, the physical, emotional, and mental, should be able to act independently of each other. The interference of one with another, sometimes going so far as inversion of function, of which we are not usually conscious, produces a chaos of thoughts and feelings whose interpretation is bound to be erroneous. The confusion of these impulses with spiritual impulses is even more disastrous, for it creates not only false ideas of the origin of such impulses, but many psychic and physical disorders. No valid path to the higher consciousness should cause or maintain a state of imbalance, physical, nervous, or mental. But this implies, of course, that one has at no point taken a wrong turning. The false use of, quote, identification would be a wrong turning. One should try to identify oneself with everything that can bring light and wisdom. But to identify oneself with the vicissitudes of daily life would be an error. They should be treated as external obligations to which the heart remains insensitive and impenetrable. Training in this is the best way to develop a true sense of values, clarity of thought, and control of emotion. Physical introspection, that is, preoccupation with health, is the other aspect of personal concern. It gives a tyrannical authority to the body, which takes advantage of this to attract attention to itself by creating any number of self-important pathological manifestations. Anxiety for this mortal life deprives us of the power to transcend it and think of the immortal life. As the Gospel says, "He who would save his life shall lose it." Wisdom offers a man control of his lower natures, but if he submits to being their slave, how can he ever attain it? We have already studied the constitution of the human machine and how it should be kept in equilibrium. This is the first stage of self-knowledge and brings its own reward. But we must not let the gorgon of selfishness divert the advantage to its own ends. The body is the house made of clay and water, but it can become a magnet for the spirit, and one would never guess how impetuously the spirit rushes into a body which opens itself to receive it. Everything comes to him who has the courage to lose himself in order to find the universe. The abyss does not swallow him up. It is he who expands into the abyss.